There are problems at all levels. It's not the problem you should focus on. It's kind of how you're going to address it, right? Don't worry about how you got there. It's like, how are you going to address it? Because there's always problems. As a leader, if you're not communicating clearly into the team, that is really bad. And by the way, you do need to come with some sort of plan when you talk about when things go wrong. Otherwise, sometimes it comes across as being a little whiny.
Straight away, like you're saying, that's potentially changed the competitiveness of the tech industry on its head in the space of a week.
What that means is that you've got to innovate faster. And that indeed does mean that you've got to stay ahead of the curve with the new technology that's coming along, and then bring the skills to the table so that people can fully embrace the change and be prepared to run forward with it.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the GCS Connect Leaders Series. We've got Gary Jamieson today. He is the VP of Innovation and Strategy for the Innovation Hub, so we'll be working very closely with him. He's also the founder of Vypian, which is a consultancy within the broadcast and telco industries. What we get from the conversation with Gary today is an understanding of someone who has had a long career within different types of companies, what the key elements of being a strong leader are in each individual company, and how you change your game and change your strategy for different types of organization and different types of customers, different types of stakeholders. And I think he's obviously done that very well because he's had a very successful career. So I'm sure you'll learn a lot from Gary today. And without further ado, here he is. Gary, hi, how are you?
David, how are you doing?
I'm very well. It's evening for me in the UK and early morning or midday for you, I think, in sunny San Francisco.
About midday in sunny San Francisco, quite correct.
Fantastic. Yeah. So as you can probably hear from Gary's accent, he's definitely not a native. Well, he's a native San Francisco now, but I think he comes from the sunnier climes of Liverpool. So great to speak to you, my friend. We're very excited to have you here as the new VP of Innovation and Strategy for the Innovation Hub.
Yep.
And innovation is what the Innovation Hub is all about. So it's great to have you on board. And we really wanted to get you on and talk to you about your career, about leadership, how we're going to be kind of working together, but also the experiences that you've had over your about 35 years kind of experience within the industry. So
which you couldn't tell from my youthful looks, but
no, that's right. Yeah, you were telling me you had the hair done. You know, you've used your kind of makeup budget for us, Gary. So yeah, all good.
That's right.
So without further ado, tell us a bit about yourself, Gary. Tell us like how you come to be in this position where we're talking to you around leadership, how you come to maybe be in San Francisco. And yeah, a little bit about your journey thus far.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me on this, right? And I'm kind of honored to be following in the footsteps of people like Ken Morse and Labie, which I know very well. But yeah, so my story kind of if I start at university, right? I think I followed a fairly traditional university path. Did know Ken Morse at university. He was a year ahead of me. So
really? Oh wow, fantastic.
But
small world.
Small world, right? And so yeah, at university, I started doing an engineering degree. I did a master's in electronics and engineering, right, followed by a PhD in signal processing, which really was great, right? Looking back at it, was really interesting times because although the PhD was all mathematics, right, it was just the bulk of mathematics. It was actually an application in the medical field. And what I learned from that was I wouldn't have been a good medic. Just a little messy for me, I think. And then, I managed to have some really good experiences with that kind of time, right? We actually got on Tomorrow's World, if that's still going. I don't know if is that still a program on the BBC?
Well, I think for our maybe younger listeners or listeners that don't come from around here, we've just gone deep into a BBC favourite. Tomorrow's World was a programme that came on, I think, after Top of the Pops, just to tick off a few boxes there. And it was on Thursday evenings, wasn't it? And they used to talk about things that are going to be big in the future. So I think they did like the internet in 1983. So Tomorrow's World was kind of a sign of a futuristic technology of the next decade. And actually, if you ever YouTube Tomorrow's World, it was ahead of the game in quite a lot of stuff, wasn't it? Electric cars, internet, that sort of thing. So what
Please
did
don't YouTube. You might
no.
find my thing, right?
So I'm definitely going to do that now. I may even add that to our post, Gary. What was your thing on Tomorrow's World?
It was kind of, think of it like an electronic stethoscope, right? That's what it was effectively. I mean, it's the kind of technology is really what's in every kind of voice control now. It's that kind of very early days of what is now everywhere, right? Voice
Mm.
control, so analyzing sound, right? But the Tomorrow's World thing was great because they love things to fail, right? That was part of the. It's done live. It is really live, right? And so it's kind of stressful when you're behind the camera, hoping that your thing works. It's kind of stressful, right? So that was one of the experiences that was kinda good at that time. I also met Princess Di, by the way, in, a kinda sponsorship thing. I can't remember what it was, but it was in London, and it was some sort of fundraiser around this
I
medical
think
thing.
I think most of our listeners, we don't have to explain who Princess Di is. I think most people
I think,
know who
yeah,
she is. I hope so.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was kinda my kinda university, days. And you mentioned, Liverpool before. I played a lot of soccer at the same time, so that was great for doing that as well, right? And then I went into lecturing at the university for a few years, right? And I mean that helped me get my PhD finished. Really, you needed that extra time to get it written up, so that's what I did for a few years before realizing that, hang on a minute, this isn't paying so well, right? So I moved on then to. I was actually asked to come and join a small uh, engineering company called. Oh well, I won't mention what the name is, but they were responsible for creating the hardware and software that controls big industrial machines, right? And when I say big industrial machines, I'm talking about the machines that build machines, right? So things like massive sheet metal cutting machines where they throw around a 10 by 10-foot piece of sheet metal at high speed and, you know, hammer holes through the thing, to things like machines that make axles for cars and things of that nature, right? So, and later on in my career, I'll mention in a second, people got worried about a software bug that may result in a blue screen, right? It kind of made me smile because, looking back at that period of my career, the equivalent software bug could be really quite catastrophic, right? Throwing around these huge bits of metal and massive grinding machines going at high speed and things. So that was kind of, I always kind of laugh at that looking back on it. And then from that small company, which allowed me to really understand how to operate in a very small environment with literally less than 10 engineers, and the kind of small amount of resources that you get in very small companies. From doing that, I then moved to Silicon Valley, right? And there's a Ken Moss connection there, but moved to Silicon Valley to a company called Power TV, which was at the time developing operating systems for set-top boxes for the TV industry, right? And that was kind of a medium-sized company, so it took me to that next level of kind of career advancement. Exposed me to a lot of really good stuff. I learned how to operate in these medium-sized companies, and it was definitely a company that relied heavily on partnerships, right? Which is something that I hadn't experienced at that point, and so that was a really good experience. Power TV eventually got acquired by Scientific Atlanta, which was kind of the next progression in my career, where that's a large company, and that's probably where I started to understand how the politics of large companies work, right? And how to be able to find your way and negotiate your way through that and to get things done. And eventually, Scientific Atlanta was acquired by Cisco, which is obviously massive, right? It operates on a massive scale. And so that kind of exposed me to, the largest level of company, the kind of multi-faceted company that operates in almost like a collection of large companies under one Cisco umbrella. So that was all really, really good experience for me. A lot of exposure. Worked with a lot of very talented people, and that brings me up to a point where working in Cisco, I was working with the Comcast team. So that's where I kind of got involved with Labib Ismail's team, and eventually that led to me being asked to come and join that team, and that, I was at Comcast for almost 10 years. And then recently, last year, I set up my own consultancy company called Vypian. That's kind of a high-tech management consultancy company here in the Valley, in Silicon Valley. And then, of course, just recently, and I'm very excited about this, then I was asked to come and join your company, the Innovation Hub, which is, the next exciting step in a long and varied career so far.
Fantastic, and we're really excited to have you on board, Gary. You bring kudos. I've had at least 3 text messages saying, "Oh, Gary's kind of working with you," so that's always a good sign, isn't it? So,
I sent all 3 messages.
yeah, that's right. It's amazing what AI can do these days, isn't it? So, yeah. So I guess and your roles as a leader. If I look back, it's kind of product development, engineering, putting products together. And then you mentioned there you were working with Comcast. So how much of your roles were kind of customer facing? How much were kind of internal facing? When you're building a product, you mentioned the politics there. Is it, how does that work in terms of the mix and the match between, working with external partners, working with internal teams? How does that usually work in a big company?
Yeah, I think it depends, I think, what side of the table you're on. So if I look at the Cisco years, right? I mean, Cisco was effectively a vendor to companies like Comcast and others, right? The thing that I was involved in was devices, creating devices for the home, so set tops or some security devices, things of that nature. And so when you are a vendor, I think the key is working closely with the partners, the customers, right, who are always demanding, as they should be, right, and making sure that you are understanding exactly what it is that they're looking for and the priorities that are important to them, right? I think it's very important. I mean, things will go wrong, right, when you're trying to deliver a product, right? So I think it's important that you phase the deliverables and understand how it can be broken down into different releases and phases so that you can um, get some small successes perhaps, right? And then show that you're actually moving forward and delivering on the things, albeit in a phased sense, right? The small successes I mentioned, I think is really important because what that allows you to do is not only keep the customer happy and keep things flowing and making sure that you're delivering on the business requirements, but also it gives you a means to measure something tangible, right? That you are actually making progress, as opposed to the big bang effect where you're trying to do everything and deliver something that's 100% correct. That's very dangerous, I think, because you could get to a point where you've delivered nothing and then you hit some snag and you really start to slip and things just get awkward, right? So so as a vendor on the vendor side of the table, I think it's really important to be able to understand that relationship with the customer and make sure that you're delivering things that keep them happy with progress.
And when you talk about small successes there, so yeah, I'm sure that they're not tiny, like, oh yeah, we've got the color right or something like that. But is that something when you're sitting in your reviews, you're sitting in your kind of product reviews, you're sitting in your kind of recontracting conversations as you go along, you're marking these off in your head, you're noting these down. We did this, or you're just piecemeal. You're kind of
Right.
you're basically spreading the love. You're giving the
Right.
good news back in, right?
So, I mean, my career has been all about software development, right? So the thing about software development is it's pretty structured, and the cycles that you go through tend to be fairly similar, right, from product to product, right? You'll bring up the base product, which has got the base functions, then you'll start to add additional functions. You may go through trials with the customer, right, where you issue early versions of the software and show that you're making progress. So there are opportunities to show those small wins, if you like, through those natural steps and phases of software development. So typically it's not, I've got the color right. It would be we've delivered phase one to a trial of, say, 50 friendlies in the field or something of that nature. you would complete that trial before moving to the next one, which may be a trial where you expand it to 500 people in the field, right? That kind of thing. So there's definitely points along the way that you can latch onto and say, we're showing progress here. This is a win, right? And that's really important because that building momentum and building of confidence is really good. And sometimes there's benefits, other benefits as well, where you will get additional help, right? It's like, wow, this is moving along nicely. Let's try and add more focus to it, perhaps bring in resources from other areas to accelerate even more, right? But that ability to show those small wins, as I call them, I think is really important.
And then when you move into Comcast, where you're more of a, I guess, more of a customer, right? And you're selling to the public. How does that change? I mean, you still obviously have stakeholders. Are you still looking to show small successes, show progress, or do you lead that in a different way?
Yeah, so on the other side of the table, as the kind of customer, which is nice, by the way. I actually really enjoyed that step
I always think that when I was a salesperson in recruitment, you're always selling to the customer, and sometimes like I'm buying job boards, right? So job boards, you have CV databases, and they're selling to me, and I'm like, it's nice to have the boot on the other foot sometimes
it,
to
it, it is nice.
negotiate that.
It is nice, but I never forgot. I think when I moved to Comcast, I didn't forget where I came from, right? So when I was working with the Cisco's of the world and other OEMs, I would remember where I came from and understand how they operate and make sure that I appreciated that and didn't make things unrealistic. So I think that helped just having that background on both side on the other side of the table before coming to Comcast. And then of course you do have your end user, your customer that's using the product in the field. Um, my position really hasn't been close to the customer facing in terms of, I'm talking to customers, but it's more about getting the feedback from the performance of the product in the field, making sure that the behavior of the network is good, making sure that the quality of the software is appropriate and not causing some user experience which can be really detrimental to the company. And that requires a different approach, right? You're starting to look at things. Um, I suppose there's a lot of statistics involved, right? There's a lot of data, right? Machine data. There's a lot of performance data, and you are keeping an eye on that along with many other groups. Like there's obviously QA teams that are working to make sure the software is doing what it's meant to do. There are field operations teams that you have to interface with to make sure that they're um, the field operations teams are fantastic. Actually, they do a great job of looking at trends. They'll see things happening. There'll be a new software release, perhaps that may give a worrying trend, and they'll pull it back before it becomes a user experience issue. But that was kind of a new aspect for me, right? Where I had to operate with all these other teams and all this data, and again prioritize what's important. I mean, there's nothing's ever perfect. You've got a lot of issues that need to be resolved, but looking at the big ones first, the P zeros, if you like, and keeping on top of those, and not just reacting to the situation, but also as you react and look at the thing you've just fixed or the problems that you've seen in the last month, 2 months, whatever. What can you take away from that to make things better tomorrow? So you're constantly looking for ways to improve. So, one of I'm kind of rules based, I suppose, and one of the rules that I kind of follow for myself is how can I make tomorrow easier and more productive, right? As a leader, I think it's important to have that mindset to keep thinking along those lines, so that you're always trying to make things more efficient, make it better for your teams, more enjoyable for the teams, better for the product. So yeah, does that answer your question? I think
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
for sure. I think what's interesting there is, and then my next question would be, obviously you've made the move between a kind of supplier to a customer, and the
Mhm.
other thing you talked about was obviously as you've grown as a leader, almost like your companies have grown, other than maybe kind of now.
Yeah.
Do you think that the challenges that you come across within these different types of organizations are generally the same, or have they? have they grown with the size of the company, or are they just different?
I think they're very different, right? I think if you go from one extreme, if you go back to the very small company, you've got people operating very quickly in a kind of startup mentality, and there's an understanding and appreciation that the resources may be limited, right? So that the problems you've got in smaller companies are those of limited resource, I would say. As things get big to a massive scale, I would say that some of the common problems I've seen are things like alignment of teams, right? That is a big one in I would say in my kind of experience, right? And so what do I mean by that? I would say that um, most products you can't deliver on your own. There's always, especially as things get to a massive scale, like networks and devices in networks and things. There's no single team delivers the product, right? It's a combination of teams all doing their thing, trying to move towards this ultimate business outcome, right? Um, so it's very important that those teams are aligned. And I think one of the problems you tend to see is what I would call priority misalignment, right? Where on the surface, everybody's saying, yeah, we're all aiming towards product X and pushing hard to get there. And everybody means well. All the teams are trying to do their job and trying to get it over the line, right? But there may be different pressures and different kind of circumstances around these teams that lead to them having slightly different priorities, and that can result in a team having a dependency on one team that starts to slip the deliverable, right? The internal deliverable, and that can have a knock-on effect, of course, right? And it may not just be a knock-on effect to a schedule and a deliverable, a business outcome. It may if it's not addressed, it could be something that affects morale, organizational structures. All there could be all kinds of weird and wonderful side effects of that. But I think that in is something that as the companies get larger and you rely on more teams, it's very important to be able to ensure that those teams are aligned. Um, I mean, not they don't have to be so tightly coupled that nothing else happens, right? But they've got to be aligned to the point where there's a certain if there's a dependency, it's going to happen in a reasonable time frame, and there's a path to correct it if there isn't. Does that make sense?
And when we've talked on the Leaders Series, I definitely see that a lot of what people have talked about is number one, communication between
Yeah,
teams,
yeah,
and number two, like a kind of shared vision. Communicating that shared vision. This is where we're going.
yeah.
And I guess as the company gets bigger, obviously those two things, particularly around developing products, are incredibly important, right? And to keep hammering down the message like this is where we're going and this is why we're
Right.
doing it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you touch on communication. To me, communication at all levels, whether it's up, down, sideways, whether it's an email, whether it's given a kind of portfolio overview or a report or whatever, it's incredibly important, right? If you're not as a leader, I think if you're not communicating clearly into the team, right, and explaining why things are why they are, that is really bad for the team, right? Because you get things just start to fester, and people become a little despondent, I suppose. And so I've always been somebody who's pushed hard on making sure that communications are very clear, are often, and at the right level for the audience, right? Um,
I guess that goes back in some ways to the kind of constantly doing the successes, right? That you said at the start, if I didn't tell people, then at the end we have a big reveal. Here it is. But that's not communication, right? And it's the same for your team, same for your managers, same for your stakeholders, same for your suppliers. Keeping them up to date is such an important part of it, isn't it?
I would say it's 50% of success almost, right? To
Mm.
make sure that the communications are very clear and appropriate and in the right directions. I mean, when I hire people, I'm looking for the right skill set, obviously, right? But I also really look closely at their ability to communicate and how they can grow in the role as a communicator and helping along those lines, right? I really strongly believe in clear communications at all levels, right? And the flip side to that is when you don't see good communications, it often correlates to things not going well, right? So yeah, communications are very, very key.
So where do you stand then on? Obviously, we talked there about communications, and we've one of the themes is the small successes, keeping people up to date on the good stuff.
hmm
Where do you where do you stand on communication of actually no, we fucked up, not something's gone wrong. How do you communicate that?
So I think it's important to not only talk about things that are going well, but obviously things aren't going well, right? Because I mean, the reality is that things don't always go to plan, right? The reality is that I mean, you should always aim for perfection, right? But you should always then compromise with reality, right? And that means that things aren't always going to go according to plan. There are too many variables in modern business to think that everything's going to go according to plan, right? So I think it's really important to say that sometimes it's gone wrong, but there's the other part of that conversation. When you have the conversation that something's gone wrong, you also need to come with a kind of plan of how you're going to correct the ship as well, right? And so I think it's important that you do celebrate the successes, which, by the way, I don't think any organization does well. I think there's a tendency in modern business to run so fast that you deliver something, it's like, wow, great, and then you're on to the next thing, right? And I'm guilty of that. I mean, definitely where it's like, right, yeah, we've done great, but let's go because there's the next thing, right? And so I think it's worth stepping back and making sure that we celebrate successes. But talking about what went wrong is also incredibly important, right? And making sure that you can explain why it went wrong, right? And what we're going to do to fix it, right?
And
But
what you've learned from it as well, I suppose.
what you've
We've learned.
learned, right? And,
Yeah,
and and it's and it's okay to say something didn't go according to plan, right? It's. I mean, you'd rather it did go to plan, but if everything went to plan, there wouldn't be any need for leaders and clever people fixing problems, right? I think you need to get that balance. You've definitely got to be able to say when things didn't go right, and talk about the reasons why and what you're going to do to correct the ship, right? And by the way, I do think you do need to come with some sort of plan when you talk about when things go wrong. Otherwise, sometimes it comes across as being a little whiny, right? If you just complain about something that went wrong, oh, this didn't go according to plan, right? I think it's true; they're the facts. But I think as leaders, you need to be seen to be trying to do something to turn that around and fix it, right? I
mm,
mean I mean, there are problems at all levels. It's not the problem you should focus on. It's kinda how you're gonna address it, right? It's like, don't worry about how you got there. It's like, how are you gonna address it? Because there's always problems, right? And
yeah.
it's
And I guess that comes back into this aligned teams, which is it would be quite easy for a leader, particularly in a large organization, to say, it was the QA team. It was their fault. This is why it didn't go right. It's
yeah.
not our fault. We're perfect. They're rubbish. You know, that again. You have to get the messaging right to keep the teams all focused and working together, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that kind of, blame game thing is terrible when that happens, right? You do see that quite a lot, especially when people are under pressure, and I think that's to some extent human nature, but I think you've gotta focus on what the problem is, not necessarily how it not at the time when you're trying to fix a problem, let's fix the problem. You should do a retrospective, figure out how you got there, right? But it's about how do I move forward from here? The problem's right here. How do I move forward and get past this problem and resolve it? And the problem with the blame game is you blame team A over there. One day it's you that's getting pointed at, right? So
Exactly.
you've
What goes
set
around comes around.
exactly. So you've got
Yeah.
to be careful there as well.
So as you move on now, we move on to this new stage, as it were, in your career. We're kind of working consultancy and now working with basically a skills and training company, which is what the Innovation Hub is. Um, do you take the same, you know, as you set your priorities and you look at your kind of role? Do you take what you've learned, or do you think will have to kind of tweak it slightly in the way that you look at leadership within your organizations?
Mm. I think it's a bit of both, right? Um, I think I've been very lucky and with the jobs I've had and what the experience I've gained as a result of that. But you never, and whatever job I go into, I'll bring to bear the stuff that matters to that job, right? But there's always something new to learn. There's always some new situation that you've got to adjust to. So I think I'll spend a lot of my time initially listening, right, and understanding the landscape and what the problems are and what the strategic kind of roadmap looks like, those kind of things. But there's going to be stuff that is going to be new to me that I'm going to have to learn, right, and that's okay. I'm totally kind of open to doing that. Um, the other thing about this new position I'm at, the innovation hub, which is great, right? It actually takes me back to something I really loved, right? It leans back towards my time when I was a university lecturer, and if I look back at all the jobs I've done, that's probably one of the most enjoyable things I've done because there's nothing like teaching something that it's naturally difficult, like, signal processing or whatever. People are like, you can see they're struggling with it, and all of a sudden, ding, the light comes on, right? And it's like, I understand it now. That to me was really something I enjoyed. It's like getting those things across and seeing the kind of the just the joy in people's faces when they suddenly get it right, and they can answer exam questions around it and stuff like that. I think the innovation hub and some of the roles that I'll be involved in with the innovation hub are very similar to those days, right? Where it is about training, it is about giving people additional capabilities and the chance to make good use of those as they grow their own careers and helping businesses thrive, right? Trying to help businesses to move to the next level, thrive, and grow. So it's great that it kind of leans back towards that point in my history, but there's going to be stuff that's new to me as well, right? I think this is the teaching at the Innovation Hub is obviously with some very talented people and companies, and I'm going to find challenges there that I'm going to have to respond to and learn myself, right? It's going to be a learning exercise to some extent to me as well. So it's exciting. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. It's great, as we said, to have you on board. And as you look at like the business landscape, and the reason why Innovation Hub is there is to help companies create the skills, I think, that potentially they can't hire. I think that's the overall idea as far as I can see it. And when you look at like the current business landscape, because you've worked for these big companies, and I've obviously supplied to these big companies, having the right skills is such a thing that holds companies back, isn't it? It's if they can't find these people, and I think they get themselves into a rut of can't find the people, so we can't do it, can't move forward. Having other options is such an important thing, right?
Yeah, I think that the challenge of high tech companies is things are moving very, very fast and accelerating, right? Things have always moved fast, but it seems to me that things are just accelerating, right? So and there's a pressure to stay ahead of the curve as much as possible. Um, and I also think in many industries the competition is getting better, right? So some large companies, smaller companies are catching up, and the competition is catching up with them. So the pressure's also there as well. What that means is that you've got to innovate faster, right? You've got to find ways to maintain that differentiating value add that you had before. And that indeed does mean that you've got to stay ahead of the curve with the new technology that's coming along and have the skills to be able to leverage that new technology. So, what I think the Innovation Hub brings is a big piece of that puzzle where you're training people up on what the new technology is, but also trying to stay ahead as an innovation hub, right? Trying to look ahead to see where the trends are going, and making sure that the innovation hub will be ready for training up the next set of skilled individuals so that they can benefit in whatever company it may be. I just feel that the real challenge is acceleration of technology and the pressure that brings, right? I mean, it just means that you've got to work a lot harder to stay differentiated. Otherwise, you just become one of the numbers, I suppose, when it comes to what you bring to the table as a company.
And we're recording this on the 27th of January. And just on the train on the way home, I was talking about innovative competitiveness. I was
Mm.
reading about this DeepSeek thing. Now we might not go live with this until March, but DeepSeek is this new Chinese AI tool which has suddenly upended the whole of like from reading of it, the whole US tech strategy in terms of they've managed to do something that has done a large language model for much cheaper, right? It's straight away, like you're saying, that's potentially change the competitiveness of the tech industry on its head in the
Yeah.
space of a week, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, this is like me reading about this paper. You probably know more about it, right? But it seems like a very interesting path forward.
Yeah, I mean, the AI,
Hmm. I mean,
AI,
AI as a whole is a huge,
it's
a huge boost to the technology industry, a huge difficulty, but
yeah,
I don't think the
yeah.
innovation has ended yet, right? It's not, oh, cool, it's innovative. I mean, just this DeepSeek thing is another step forward, right?
Yeah, I think AI, it's like every week there's something new,
Mm,
right? It's hard to keep up. But I really believe in the promise of AI, right? I mean,
mm,
I mean, some of the things that I've been involved in to this point with AI, Labib and I had plenty of conversations when I was at Comcast on AI, right? And we did some really good stuff there when, over a year ago now, that was making good use of AI at the time, right?
mm,
And it became very clear to me that there are huge benefits to what it can do, and really the things I've been involved in are of being creating utilities and tools that save people time, right? So I know people can be a little concerned about AI, but I think of it as something that allows you to save time, right?
mm,
It basically frees up time so that you can apply yourself and your resources to what they should be doing, right? So you got a lot of very clever people. They shouldn't be spending time. I don't know. Some of the problems we've solved with AI were finding data very easily, right? So if you think of large organizations, you've got masses of data in all kinds of databases, right? But good luck trying to find it, right? Because there's so much of it that it's very difficult to just go and search for and find what you're looking for. We created utilities that allowed you to be able to find what you're looking for through a kind of role-driven, context-driven portal. And AI is very good at going searching all those databases and coming back with a kind of concise, a summary of what you may be looking for. And we did a few tools around that. One being searching for data you may need, but also things like we did a utility that when you open a bug ticket, like in a bug ticketing system like Jira or something like that, there's this crazy statistic that a huge number of tickets that are opened are duplicates of previous tickets, right? So it doesn't matter what industry you're in. It's just the nature of creating these bugs and things. And so we created a utility that actually, when you're about to open a new bug, before it actually becomes committed to the database, and added to the other 10 million bugs that are there, it goes and looks at what already exists and comes back and says, by the way, you may want to look at these other open issues or sometimes closed issues because it looks very similar to what you're talking about. And so in the best case, that stops you from opening up a new bug because it already exists. And in the in the extreme case, you may find what you're about to go and delve into is already fixed, right? So the point I'm making is that with AI, there's a lot. I think we're scratching at the surface still, but to me, it's about how do you use it to make what I said before, kind of life easier. How do I make tomorrow easier and more productive? And the things that I've been involved in with AI to this point have really been about, uh, you know, finding time, pulling time back so that you can get your resources to be focusing on what they should be doing, which in most industries is obviously adding value to the product, differentiating the product from the competition, like we talked about before. That's where you want to be putting all your clever people, right? And I think AI helps to do that, right? But there's so much more it can do, and like you say, every day almost every week there's something new coming along that it's you got to do your best to try and keep on top of.
And is that where you see like the kind of changes in the future business landscape? Let's say within broadcast and telco, which is your main areas, which is where the innovation hub particularly works.
Mhm.
do you say AI driving the major changes in that landscape?
Um, I don't know, right? I think of AI more as like a tool, right? It's like, you use a pen, right? I mean, well, that's a bad analogy because most people don't use pens anymore, but um, it's going to become a tool that everybody uses. It's like that now, actually, right? If you think about it, I mean, I use AI almost every day for whatever reason, right? Whether I'm quickly trying to get some data that I need to, figure out how to make something work, or whether I'm writing a bit of code or a script. I go straight to AI now and say what I'm trying to do, and it comes back with something that's a really good starting point, right? So I think it'll just become, or already has become, the tool. It's just a tool that's available to you to be able to move faster. Um, will it have more influence on roadmaps and the way the industry moves? I'm sure it will, but I don't know at this stage to what extent. Right? I mean, it's TBD. I think, but it's here, and it's people are making good use of it, and it's really exciting. And I think people need to accept it and make good use of it. They need to understand it, though, right? I mean,
Mm.
you need to understand its limitations and what it can and can't do. But once you've got that appreciation, I think most people will find it's incredibly useful, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's the case. So what changes do you see then? If the key changes may be driven by other factors, what do you see kind of coming out of that future business landscape in the next, 12, 18, 24 months within your potentially your industry now, which can be skills and training, but also within broadcast and telco?
Yeah, I think back to the rate at which things are moving, right? I think maybe look at it from a customer point of view, right? For a lot of these service industries, there are existing customers and there are potentially new customers, right? I think one of the things that, as the competition gets better, I think one of the things that's really important may be to ensure that you don't have any churn, right? Try and reduce the churn and maintain your customer base. And I think that relies a lot on quality of service and the availability of service, right? If you turn it around and think of the conversation the other direction, what is the reason that people kind of move from one company to another? It's usually triggered on some negative event, right? Where they think, right, I'll go and try over there instead of where I've been, right? So if you don't have those negative events, if the quality's good, if all the base services are exactly what people are looking for, I think that's an area that companies need to focus on, right? It's the quality aspect, making sure that the user experience is good, the simplicity is there, right? I think we all have complicated lives. Why make them more difficult, right? By the way, I think that's where AI can really help, right? And
Mm.
is helping, where the simplicity of, how do I get this set up? How do I find what I'm looking for, right? I think there's a lot of advances that have happened there to make life simpler. Um, Simplicity of interfaces, right? To just get to the service I'm looking for. I don't want to think about the 10 different steps how to get there. I just want it to be there, right? Um, Having the services everywhere, right? I think there's a lot of emphasis on high performance, right? Yeah, you need the greatest speeds for this. You need this thing runs at a million miles an hour kind of thing. I think that's great, right? And there's definitely um, segments of the market that want that, right? In the kind of industry we're in, I think the gamers, of course, push the boundaries of speed and you have to have low latency and all that good stuff. But let's not forget that the bulk of people, myself included, it's like I just need the service to be working well wherever I am on wherever I'm doing on whatever device I'm on, right? So I don't know. The analogy may be I need my car to run consistently at 50 miles an hour on any highway, right, for the next 100,000 miles.
Yeah,
The fact that it can do like 200 miles an hour, that's great, but I'll only use
I
that every
can't
now
use
and
it.
then.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's the case. They talk about software sometimes, and they say most people only use 10% of the actual ability of the software. And
Yeah,
when you
I
train
think so.
people, you got these things that everyone always uses. I guess when you were talking there about data, that's the sort of data you get. So you should be developing this sensor because everyone seems to use it, but no one really cares about that button.
Yeah, yeah. So I think you do need to have those high-end performance, the outliers, right? You still
Mm.
need to cater for the outliers, but you can't forget the kinda, the middle band as well, and make sure that you're keeping that solid and not introducing any, issues that make people think, "Hmm, maybe I should look elsewhere." I think that's an approach that I would advocate, right?
So when you're going into, now consulting with organizations, what are the what are the three pieces of advice? What are the pieces of advice that you give to them that you think are really important for them to kind of think about how they're setting up their projects or working with their customers?
So, I mean, there are some classic things I can think of, like, if you're setting up a team and you want to be successful, you've got to build it. You're only as successful as the team around you, right? So you have to build a team that is, I think of when I'm building teams or built teams in the past, it's always, well, let's get people in who are better than me, right? No funny comments there. That's not hard, right? But it's like you've got to build a team that has got capable people, and then you've got to empower that team as well, right? You've got to allow them explain through the communications, very clear communications that where we're going and what the strategy is and why we're doing what we're doing, but then empower the individuals in the team to be able to move forward and on their own, and achieve the goals on their own, and challenge them as well, right? People like to be challenged to the point where they're learning new skills and also growing in their career, right? I mean, if you're just doing the same thing day in day out and it's very easy for you, that's not a good place to be, right? So, I think building the team is really important, right? Uh, I think the other thing, another kind of cliche, I suppose, is change is inevitable, right? So if you fight change, I think if you resist change, I think that can be really detrimental to individuals, teams, companies, right? I think you just have to accept the fact that change is inevitable. Then once you've accepted that, then you can start to negotiate your way through it, with it, go along with it, or redirect it or whatever. But change is going to happen, right? And without change, things don't get any better, right? It's like it's evolution. If you allow something to change, it's going to lead to things that will increase, productivity perhaps, or add value that you didn't see before. And it can even do things like identify problems that you hadn't considered before, right? Maybe you're spending too much money on some resource that you hadn't really, seen, right? And some change comes along that highlights the fact that, wow, I didn't realize we were, spending so much on such a resource. Let's address that, right? So the other thing I would say is change is inevitable, and human nature, I think, is people don't like change. They get in a position where they're happy what they're doing to some extent. So change, particularly large organizational changes and things that raise a lot of questions. People don't like it, right? But I think you have to accept it because it's going to happen, and then you can negotiate your way through it. So as leaders, I think it's important to be able to explain why change is happening, right? And explain the benefits and what triggered it perhaps, and where it's leading us, what the strategy is, why we're going there. And then I think if you can, back to communication, right? If you can communicate those points well, you'll find that the team will follow, right? I mean, you'll get people who will stand behind the change and buy into it and move forward. I think that's really important.
And I guess that goes back to the whole idea of the innovation hub and talking about from the teaching is as things are changing, then what you're really looking to do as a leader is to not only communicate with people, but also help people learn, to actually increase their skills and make it available for them to learn new things and to progress together.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, there's definitely, part of what the Innovation Hub brings is to identify what those changes are, and then,
Mm.
hopefully get ahead of some of those changes, and then bring the teaching, the skills to the table so that people can fully embrace the change and be prepared to run forward with it, right? So yeah, I think it's important.
Brilliant. So to finish up the conversation then, Gary, I mean, it's been a really, really informative conversation. We're very excited to have you with us. What are your priorities for this kind of year ahead as you look to, like I said, new phase in your career? What are your main priorities?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned before, I'm going to be listening a lot. I'm already listening, right, and seeing where it is we're going, where the innovation hub is going, right. I think there are some tactical things that are already in flight that I'm kind of getting involved in, that are going to be, some of my focus is going to be there, of course, to pick those up and run with them, right. Some teaching commitments and things of that nature. Maybe nurturing some of the relationships that already exist, right? And then I think there's more the strategic stuff that I'll be getting involved in, and shifting my focus more and more onto that, which will be beyond the current relationships. What are other potential new relationships that we can set up and start to build? What are, we've talked about technology and how fast that's moving. I think, what are the trends in the industry that we need to keep an eye on and prepare for, right? And we probably need to do some sort of, analysis of all the different things happening, which ones are likely to drop and need attention that the Innovation Hub can get involved in. Um, and beyond that, just looking to see, is there something completely new, 3 years, 5 years down the road, that we probably should start thinking about. Beyond the recruiting, beyond the teaching, what else is coming along that could be potentially a new revenue stream, right? So it's really exciting. I mean, there's a lot of
Definitely.
unknowns in all that, right? And going back to stretching individuals to keep them, growing. I think I'm going to be stretched to learn new things, and it's going to be great, right? So really excited to be involved.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And what we need is a VP of Innovation and Strategy. And hey, here we are. Let's go. No, so I'm very, very excited, and it is really good. And I think when you think about that in terms of skills, of how they're changing, how companies need to change, it's people that change companies, right? It's people that are there to drive it forward, and you need everyone kind of on board. I think the key thing I've taken from this is to keep communicating these steps forward, right?
Yeah.
Keep communicating this, because that's what buys people into a positive mind frame, that we did this.
Yeah. I mean, you people are everything, right? I mean, the skills, the innovation, it all comes from the people in the team, and it's, again, as leaders, it's part of our job is to put them in a position of success, right? You give them what they need to be able to succeed, in terms of, this is where we'd like to go. What are the ideas to get there? You're empowered to come up with the ideas and question what doesn't make sense, and make sure that we're all moving in the same direction. But definitely, I mean, that's a little cliche, but your people are everything, right? I mean, if you don't have a good team around you, like I said, then you're only as successful as the team around you.
Brilliant. Well, excited to have you on the team then, Gary, and looking forward to moving forward with the Innovation Hub. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, David.
Thanks.